The story of Congo's struggle did not begin with gunfire, it began with silence. The Congo River stretched wide and calm, like a mirror reflecting centuries of dreams and betrayal. In 1998, the silence was heavy, almost sacred, as if the land itself was waiting for something terrible to wake it. People whispered that Congo was too rich for peace, too vast for control. And soon, that whisper became prophecy. For decades, Congo had been bruised by the weight of others. After years under the ruthless Mobutu Sese Seko, the nation was tired of fear. When Laurent Désiré Kabila's fighters marched triumphantly into Kinshasa in 1997, people believed a new dawn had come. Radios played songs of freedom, markets filled again, and families dared to hope that the chains of the past had finally broken. But freedom in Congo has always come with a shadow. Kabila's power was not born alone. Rwanda and Uganda had helped him rise. They had crossed borders to chase rebel enemies, but deep down they wanted something else. Congo's soil was a treasure chest, gold, diamonds, copper, and coltan minerals the modern world depended on. Beneath every inch of its beauty lay temptation. Kabila soon realized that those who had lifted him to power were beginning to pull his strings. They expected obedience. They expected a share of Congo's riches. And when Kabila tried to rule with independence, those same allies turned against him. The man who had been celebrated as a liberator was now surrounded by suspicion. In August 1998, tensions snapped like dry wood. Kabila ordered all foreign troops out of Congo. His message was clear: Congo belongs to Congolese hands. But his words, meant to protect his people, sparked an inferno. Rwanda and Uganda, feeling betrayed, backed a new rebellion to remove him. Once again, Congo was the chessboard, and its people were the pawns. The rebellion swept through towns like wind through dry grass. Planes roared over jungles, and thousands fled their homes. Mothers held their children close as soldiers marched past villages. Roads filled with people searching for safety, not knowing if safety existed anywhere at all. But even in chaos, there were flickers of courage. In a small town near Kisangani, a teacher named Maleka refused to abandon her students. She gathered them under a broken roof, reading lessons by candlelight as explosions echoed in the distance. "Knowledge," she whispered, "it's the one thing no war can steal." Her words spread like prayer through the frightened town. Meanwhile, in Kinshasa, Kabila struggled to hold his ground. His advisors warned him that he was surrounded not only by rebels but by greed, deceit, and exhaustion. Still, he refused to kneel. "If I fall," he told his generals, "let it be while defending Congo's soul." As the conflict deepened, foreign nations picked their sides. Zimbabwe, Angola, and Namibia sent soldiers to support Kabila, claiming brotherhood and African solidarity. But others whispered that they, too, wanted Congo's minerals. What began as a rebellion now stretched across 9 nations, the largest war Africa had ever seen. The people called it Africa's World War. While armies fought for territory, civilians fought for survival. Entire generations were born in the sound of war, children who never knew silence. Yet, even in despair, hope found its way. Churches opened their doors to refugees. Neighbors shared food with strangers. Somewhere deep in the forest, a pastor carried an old Bible and a message: "The land may bleed, but it will not die." By 1999, weary from endless fighting, leaders from 6 nations met in Lusaka, Zambia. They signed the Lusaka ceasefire agreement, a fragile promise that the guns would quiet. The world looked on with cautious hope. But peace in Congo was a fragile dream. It could shatter with a single order. And it did. Fighting erupted again in the east, where rebels and foreign forces continued to clash. The United Nations sent peacekeepers, the Monarch mission, but even they struggled to separate enemies from allies. The jungles swallowed armies, and every victory was temporary. Amid the chaos, Kabila walked alone one evening beside the Congo River. The sunset painted the water gold. But his reflection looked tired. "They all come for what is beneath," he murmured, "and forget the people who live above. Those close to him said he was changing. He still spoke with pride, but his voice carried a quiet sorrow, the sound of a man who had seen too much. He wanted to rebuild schools, restore dignity, and make Congo stand tall again. But betrayal circled like vultures. Then, on a January afternoon in 2001, the story took a darker turn. Inside his presidential office, Laurent Désiré Kabila was shot by one of his own bodyguards. The news spread across Congo like thunder. Radios fell silent. People cried in the streets. For a moment, even the river seemed to stop flowing. The man who had promised to lift Congo out of darkness now lay still. Another leader taken by the storm he tried to calm. The nation he loved stood trembling, unsure whether this was the end or another beginning. But destiny was not finished with Congo. From the grief rose his son Joseph Kabila, quiet, young, and untested. The world doubted him, yet his face carried the same determination as his father's, as he took the oath of leadership. He looked out over a broken land, and one question echoed across Africa. Could the son heal the wounds his father could not? The war had not ended. It had only changed its face. The fight for Congo's soul was far from over. When Joseph Kabila took the oath as president in 2001, the air in Kinshasa felt heavy with both sorrow and fragile hope. The city was still mourning his father, Laurent Désiré Kabila, whose sudden death had left the nation in shock. People whispered his name in markets and streets, wondering if his young son could carry the weight of a country that had forgotten peace. At only 29, Joseph was quiet and deliberate, more a listener than a speaker. But behind that silence, he carried an urgency to heal what years of betrayal had broken. Congo was still at war. The East was fractured, controlled by multiple rebel groups backed by Rwanda and Uganda. Foreign soldiers roamed its forests, trading weapons for minerals. The West, under government control, tried to function, but corruption and fear hung everywhere. People prayed that this new leader would not become another echo of failure. Joseph's first act was unexpected. Instead of revenge, he called for dialogue. He reached out to neighboring countries, to rebels, to the United Nations, anyone willing to listen. His words were calm but carried power. Congo's war cannot end in silence. It must end in understanding. Peace was slow to trust him. But in early 2002, something began to shift. Negotiations restarted in Sun City, South Africa, where rival Congolese groups sat around a single table for the first time. Delegates came dressed in power and pride, but the young president's tone disarmed them. He spoke not as a ruler, but as a man who had seen loss too closely. "We are not enemies," he said. "We are victims of the same wound." Those words became the heartbeat of the talks. 4 months. Debates stretched long into the night. Rwanda and Uganda sent representatives, both cautious yet curious. Each side accused the other of deceit, but Joseph refused to give up. Behind the cameras and the papers, something genuine began to form, the idea that maybe, just maybe, Congo could stop bleeding. While politicians argued in conference rooms, ordinary citizens kept the country alive. In Goma, a group of young volunteers built makeshift classrooms for displaced children. In Bukavu, women gathered every evening to pray under trees. They didn't wait for peace agreements. They lived peace in their small, determined acts. The resilience of the people became a silent rebellion against despair. In April 2002, a fragile milestone emerged: the Pretoria Agreement between Congo and Rwanda. Rwanda agreed to withdraw its troops, and Congo promised to disarm hostile militias operating within its borders. For the first time in years, there was a hint of calm. Soon after, Uganda signed a similar accord. The international community took notice. The world that had once looked away began to listen. But peace is never born in a single signature. Even as leaders shook hands, rebels continued to fight in remote forests. Every inch of Congo's land seemed to carry both hope and tension. Yet Joseph persisted. He toured cities, met communities, and rebuilt trust one conversation at a time. We have to remember, he told crowds, that the war may have divided us, but it did not destroy who we are. In late 2002, something extraordinary happened. The warring factions, government, rebels, and civil groups finally agreed to form a transitional government. For the first time, enemies became colleagues. It was an uneasy alliance, but it signaled the beginning of transformation. The peace deal was signed in December 2002 in Pretoria. People cried in the streets, hugging strangers. Bells rang across Kinshasa. For many, it felt like waking from a nightmare. Still, the scars of war ran deep. In the east, the echoes of conflict continued. Local militias refused to lay down arms. Families searched for loved ones lost in the chaos. But slowly, life began to return. Markets reopened, roads were repaired, schools rebuilt. Joseph knew rebuilding would take more than treaties. He turned his focus to elections. Congo's first in 4 decades. It was a bold move. Advisors warned him that the country wasn't ready. But he believed democracy was the only path to true healing. If we cannot choose our future, he said, then peace will always be borrowed. As preparations began, a new spirit moved across the nation. People who once hid in fear now registered to vote. Artists painted murals of unity on walls still cracked by war. Radio stations played songs of hope instead of reports of battle. By 2003, most foreign troops had withdrawn, and the official end of the Second Congo War was declared. The world called it a peace, but those who had lived through it knew real peace was not a paper. It was a daily struggle. In a quiet village near Kisangani, an old teacher named Maleka, the same woman who once taught children under the sound of bombs, stood before her students again. Her voice trembled as she spoke. You are the generation born in war, but you must grow in peace. Build what we could not finish. The children nodded, their notebooks open, the future reflected in their eyes. As the months passed, Congo began to breathe again. Streets that had known fear now echoed with laughter. The same river that once carried whispers of pain now mirrored rebuilding bridges. Joseph Kabila's calm leadership had done what few thought possible: unite a land long torn apart. But even as he stood on the balcony of the presidential palace, looking over Kinshasa's lights, he knew the battle wasn't truly over. The struggle for Congo's soul wasn't just about war. It was about justice, equality, and remembering the millions who never saw peace return. He whispered to himself, peace is not the end of war. It is the beginning of responsibility. Years later, historians would call the Second Congo War the deadliest conflict since World War II. Yet they would also remember the resilience of its people. The mothers who rebuilt villages, the youth who refused to give up, the leaders who finally chose conversation over chaos. The war had begun as a fight for power. It ended as a fight for identity. And in the heart of Africa, the Congo River kept flowing, vast, strong, and unbroken, just like the people who lived beside it. Peace is not found in the silence after gunfire. It is built in the courage of those who choose healing over hate. Congo's story proves that even after the darkest storms, a nation can still rise if its people remember who they are.